Hello, and welcome back to Pathfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is part of a series I am producing covering the various deities in the Pathfinder role-playing game and its setting, the world of Golarion. Last time I covered Gorum, the god of battle, armor, and weapons. This time I am covering Torag, god of the forge, protection, and strategy, and the father of the dwarves. Torag is an ancient god who serves as the head of the ancestral dwarven pantheon. He is often referred to as the father of creation, the father of dwarven kind, or the forge father by his faithful. Despite being primarily a dwarven deity, his domains over metalcraft and protection means he is widely worshipped among other ancestries. Beyond his dedicated clergy, he is worshipped primarily by smiths, tacticians, and, of course, dwarves. Torag is almost universally depicted as a stern, middle-aged dwarf, with broad shoulders, a strong physique, and a long, full beard streaked with gray. His eyes glow like molten metal, and his hands are worn and calloused from unending toil. He is generally depicted in intricate heavy armor of his own make, though the exact details of the armor will vary from artist to artist. He is usually shown to be working at his forge, wielding his hammer, kaglemros. Alternatively, he is occasionally shown as placing himself between young dwarves and danger, fighting off foes in defense of the innocent. The Taralu dwarves of the Mwangi Expanse take a unique approach to their faith in Torag. They generally depict the Forge Father both as a dwarf and as a dragon. This practice comes from their cultural reverence of dragons and belief that all divine power is draconic in origin. Torag makes his home in heaven, in his deific realm of Forgeheart. Forgeheart is, first and foremost, a smithy. In Forgeheart, Torag forges the weapons, armor, and tools for the armies of heaven, backed up by his fellow members of the dwarven pantheon and by his most devoted followers and divine servitors. Torag and most of his family live here, instructing their followers in the arts of mining and craftsmanship. Devout followers of Torag, called Toragdans, are tasked with living lives of hard work, honor, honesty, and strength. They are expected to learn and hone a useful craft, typically smithing, but possibly leatherworking, masonry, carpentry, or other skills, and to put that craft to use for the betterment of their community. Followers must also be prepared to defend their communities and should not shy away from violence if the need arises. Torag espouses the ideal that the best offense is a good defense, and his followers emphasize this in their daily lives. They prepare for hard times with training and the stockpiling of resources, then outfit themselves with well-made equipment for whatever task lies ahead. Temples and churches to Torag are extremely common in the parts of Golarion where he is worshipped. Temples take the form of large forges, and worship involves working the forge to create useful tools and equipment. This pragmatic approach to worship, coupled with the Forge Father's emphasis on the importance of community, means that temples often serve as the beating heart of their communities. As communities grow, a temple will be expanded, typically by increasing the size of the central forge, then by increasing the number of workstations branching out from it. Torag is, above all, a god of dwarves, and anywhere dwarves gather, his church will be present. The Five Kings Mountains, as the seat of dwarven power in Avestan, serves as the greatest center of worship for Torag in the Inner Sea region. Other large dwarf communities, such as the sky citadels of Yanderhof in Varissia and Kragadan in Nirmathas, also serve as centers of worship. Notably, the sky citadel of Dongan Hold has an odd relationship with the Church of Torag, since it has been isolated from magic for so many years, and therefore from Torag's divine powers. Outside of dwarfs, several communities of humans have taken to the faith of Torag. The Ulfin peoples of the far north consider Torag to be one of their patron deities, and Taldans have taken to the faith of Torag due to his emphasis on industriousness. Followers of Torag believe that he forged the world at his great anvil, striking at raw material until he refined his creation into the material plane, and specifically Golarion. It is through this process that dwarves were first created. Torag hammered the dwarves into existence, forming their bodies from the sturdiest of stone, and filling their bellies with the fire of his forge. Torag tends to take a light approach when it comes to aiding his worshippers, seeing himself as a distant father figure. He believes that if his children come to rely on him too much, they will never become strong enough to care for themselves. As such, legends of Torag's direct actions on the material plane are scarce, though he is known to occasionally send advice in the form of riddles which appear in stone. Followers will need to solve these riddles for themselves, for even when Torag helps his faithful, he expects them to work. The most famous legend of Torag's direct intervention in the fate of the world is his involvement in the imprisonment of Rovagug. Once the plan to capture the rough beast was finalized, Torag set to work with Gorum and Pharasma to design and build the Dead Vault, a prison meant to be entirely inescapable. The Dead Vault is located at the metaphysical heart of the planet Golarion, which leads to some gods referring to Golarion as the Cage to this day. Once the prison was constructed, Abadar provided the lock and key, and Asmodeus turned the key, leaving the rough beast imprisoned for eternity. Torag's other great involvement in the affairs of mortals is the dwarven quest for sky. Dwarves began their existence as a subterranean people, living in the Darklands as craftsmen and miners. Torag, however, had plans for his creation. He commanded the dwarves to wait for the day when Golarion itself would shake, then to begin their endless trek upward out of the Darklands. The day soon came when the events of Earthfall would shake Golarion to its core, and the dwarves, led by the legendary king Targic, drove themselves toward the surface. They emerged in the Five Kings Mountains and established the first sky citadel in the Age of Darkness. Unfortunately, in their haste, the dwarves also drove the orcs to the surface world from the Darklands, and the two peoples would fight for ages to come. Among other deities, Torag is generally well respected, if not always well liked. Many gods consider him to be a stern, stoic, stubborn figure, though those same gods would likely also describe him as principled, level-headed, and devoted. Torag is on good terms with several major deities of the Inner Sea region. He and Abadar maintain a good working relationship, since the Master of the First Vault reigns over commerce, and Torag's industrious dwarven followers require trade to thrive. Torag also gets along well with Cayden Cailean, since the lucky drunk values a good drink at the end of a hard day's work, and Torag heartily agrees with this belief. The father of dwarven kind is on good terms with Iomedae, as the two of them share domain over military training and tactics, and the preservation of community. Among the non-dwarven gods, Torag is closest to Erastil, the god of hunting and family. The two of them share a lot in common, from their curmudgeonly attitudes to their domains over family and community. Each god encourages his followers to keep to themselves and never seek out conflict. Likewise, each encourages his followers to be industrious, loyal, and prepared to defend themselves and their families in case of attack. Followers of these two deities might come from different backgrounds, city-dwelling smiths of Torag and village-dwelling hunters or farmers for Erastil, but they will likely find common ground easily enough. One of Torag's odd relationships is that with Nivi Rambadazzle, the Svirfneblin/gnome goddess of gems, stealth, and gambling. Legend has it that Nivi Rambadazzle acquired a gemstone of impossible beauty in her adventures in the Darklands while she was still mortal. She then traded this gem to Torag in exchange for a spark of divinity, thus ascending to godhood. Torag has a strained relationship with Sarenrae, despite both deities sharing a good alignment. He considers her dedication to mercy to be a sign of weakness, which will only ever lead to trouble. Likewise, Sarenrae generally considers Torag's stubborn ideas of justice to be cruel. Followers of these gods might occasionally find themselves on the same side of a battle, but will rarely get along well with each other. Torag, like most gods, has several dedicated enemies. He dislikes and actively opposes most aggressive evil gods, and has a particular distaste for Rovagug. He also specifically despises Moloch, the general of Hell's armies. Torag considers Moloch's dominion over war and conquest to be a corruption of his own domains of community and strategy. Moloch revels in this hatred, taking a special pleasure in burned sacrifices of Toragdan priests after a successful conquest. Zurzvater is another hated rival, as the father of the fire giants is a blacksmith like Torag himself. Zurzvater respects Torag and his dwarves for their work as smiths, but considers them to be an annoyance, and specifically commands his fire giant followers to enslave dwarves, given the opportunity. Of course, Torag's closest relationships are with his fellow members of the dwarven pantheon. Dwarves on Golarion worship many gods, some of which are human or present as human. However, dwarves do have a specific ancestral pantheon which they worshipped before they came to the surface world. These gods are all depicted as dwarves, and Torag is the most important of them all. I might do a more detailed breakdown of this pantheon in the future, especially now that Paizo has put out a Lost Omens book on High Helm, but for now, here's a quick rundown. Torag has two brothers, Magrim and Angrad, the dwarven gods of death and war respectively. His half-sister, Drangvit, serves as a goddess of vengeance and debt. Torag is married to Fulgrit, the watchful mother, a goddess of hearths and children. The two of them together have 4 children, Bolka, the goddess of love and beauty, Grudnar, the god of loyalty and peace, Kols, the god of duty and honor, and Trud, the god of bravery and strength. All of these gods are loyal to Torag and follow his lead as the head of their household. Only Droskar, the dark smith, opposes Torag's will. Droskar once served as Torag's student, but abandoned his master's teachings and became a god of toil and slavery. Droskar now serves as the patron god of the Duergar, the dwarves who never left the Darklands following the quest for Sky. Droskar and Torag are engaged in a long-standing Cold War, which has been simmering for centuries. For players who might be interested in playing characters who follow Torag, here are a few useful details. For those using the alignment rules, Torag is a lawful good deity, and he accepts clerics of only lawful good and lawful neutral alignments. His edicts are to be honorable and forthright, to keep your word, to respect the forge, and to serve your people. Conversely, to cheat or tell lies, to intentionally create inferior works, or to show mercy to the enemies of your people are all anathema to Torag. His holy symbol is a hammer with its head facing down. This represents his own hammer, which is both a tool of creation and a weapon of war. His domains are creation, earth, family, and protection, though he also has the alternate domain of duty. Torag's sacred colors are gold and gray, though the gray can really include any metallic color. Steel and iron are the most common interpretations. Followers will generally wear work clothes outside of combat, and even ceremonial religious outfits are limited to well-worn smithing aprons and tool belts. Unlike many deities, ceremonies dedicated to Torag are incredibly practical, so getting one's clothes and hands dirty is expected. In combat or on an adventure, followers will typically wear sturdy, practical armor, with an emphasis on function over form. Many followers will make their own armor or gear, or at least make components of it. Toragdan design sensibilities lean heavily toward the practical as opposed to the decorative. The only exception to this rule is in hair care and decorative rings. Followers of Torag will generally wear their hair long and styled into braids. This also applies to facial hair for those followers who can grow it. Braids are decorated with metal rings, which are in turn decorated with Torag's holy symbol and marked with runes. These rings must be earned by the wearer through some personal achievement, and the runes indicate what that achievement was. Achievements can include marriage, the birth of a child, a successful battle in defense of others, crafting one's first suit of full plate, or locating a vein of metal in a mine. Torag's sacred weapon is the warhammer, and weapons in the hammer group are by far the most common among his followers. Clubs and axes are popular as well, as are daggers, due in part to the dwarven cultural practice of crafting clan daggers. Torag's emphasis on protection and defense means that shields are also common among his followers, and many of the faithful will practice sword and board fighting styles, which emphasize defending both themselves and others. Followers who wield ranged weapons will often gravitate toward traditional dwarven choices like a crossbow. These weapons are excellent for community defense, as they are generally easier for untrained civilians to wield in a pinch. Dwarven followers are also likely to have access to some more exotic weapons, from the meteor hammer and the Dorn Dergar to the gauntlet bow and the wrecker. Followers from Dongon Hold or Alkenstar might also gravitate towards firearms. Torag's favorite animal is the badger. He also has a fondness for other burrowing animals, or animals which dwell in caves. Armadillos, gophers, and other burrowers might serve as excellent familiars, while bears and dire badgers would make for excellent animal companions. Followers from Dongon Hold are also likely to have small cats as pets or familiars. Notably, bats are considered an abomination, as a creature which flies underground. Torag's formal clergy is made up largely of clerics of both the cloistered and war priest doctrines. The church also employs a large number of fighters and champions, and even some gunslingers or inventors, particularly in Dongon Hold. Bards are also occasionally members of the clergy, tasked with telling the followers of their history and inspiring them to greater achievements. Outside of the clergy, followers might also include barbarians seeking to contain their inner rage, or sorcerers of the elemental earth bloodline, Shaitan Genie bloodline, or the Wyrmblessed bloodline in the Mwangi Expanse. Wizards of the school of civic wizardry might also feel drawn to the Forge Father's emphasis on community. Martial followers are likely to incorporate archetypes which focus on battlefield command and defense, including the Marshal, the Bastion, and the Sentinel. Kineticists might also feel drawn to the faith of Torag, and dwarves might connect to their perceived heritage by opening their fire, metal, and earth elemental gates. Dwarves are, by far, the most common worshippers of Torag, from the mountains of Avestan to the jungles of the Mwangi Expanse in Garund. Humans worship Torag as well, specifically the Ulfin peoples of the land of the Lenorm kings, and the people of Taldor, and some citizens of Alkenstar. Other worshippers include Oreads, the elemental earth Geniekin heritage. All that being said, most characters with a strong connection to blacksmithing could reasonably be followers of the Father of Creation. Devout followers of Torag will lead lives of hard work, tradition, and community service. They push themselves to master a practical craft, like smithing or woodworking, then put that mastery to use in helping their community. They will train in military tactics and martial skill, but will try to only ever put those skills to use in the defense of others. Followers might be hesitant to become adventurers and explorers, but will readily step up to defend their communities against anything. Followers of the Forge Father will serve as excellent PCs in defensive campaigns where the protagonists are seeking to defend against an oncoming threat. For further character inspiration, or to homebrew some custom items for a follower of Torag, check out his first edition page on Archives of Nethys. His Paladin Code is a great source of roleplay inspiration, while the Sacred Sentinel Prestige class might be a good source of build inspiration. For GMs looking to integrate Torag and his followers into a campaign, here are some ideas. Torag's current herald is the Grand Defender, an enormous metal construct which serves as a living tomb for the souls of his most devout followers. His divine servitors are the Chalkosts, dwarf-like creatures made entirely from metal and stone, and formed from the souls of especially skilled or heroic dwarves. As mentioned earlier, on the rare occasion when he does choose to communicate with his followers, Torag typically sends riddles etched in stone for the recipient to interpret. Earthquakes are considered a sign of his disfavor, because he isn't exactly known for subtlety. Followers of Torag are notoriously stubborn, and are often slow to act militarily unless they are directly threatened. A group of PCs who need military assistance might need to work very hard to convince Torag's faithful to help them. This applies even to situations where the faithful and the PCs are nominally allies, or where they share alignments. The PCs might need to convince Toragdan priests that taking action is in their best interests, or that not taking action would put them and their community in greater danger. Next, the dwarves of Avestan have been in something of a cultural decline for centuries. Multiple sky citadels and other major settlements have been abandoned, or mostly abandoned due to external threats. The Five Kings Mountains were once a unified land before being broken apart into individual kingdoms. They have since reunified, but their reduced stature remains. A campaign which focuses on a group of PCs reclaiming some lost dwarven glory would heavily feature the faith of Torag, as well as the other gods of the dwarven pantheon. Such a campaign could feature PCs facing off against traditional dwarven enemies, giants, orcs, dragons, drow, at least pre-remaster, and, of course, Duergar. Finally, the city of Dongonhold is a fascinating melting pot of cultures. Multiple factions wield significant political and military power. The Church of Torag here is in a strange place, since the dwarves of Dongonhold spent centuries locked into a magic dead vault within the Darklands. Priests were cut off from their source of magic, and dwarves came to rely on their firearms and military skill rather than godly power. This city would serve as an excellent setting for an intrigue-style campaign. And that's it. That's Torag, the Forge Father, god of smithing, tactics, and community. This script was easy for me to write, in part because I wanted to review the Dwarven Pantheon, but also because I really like the Dwarven ancestry. They are one of the ancestries with the most information available, and the Dwarven communities all across Golarion venerate Torag in a wide variety of ways. I highly recommend Lost Omen's High Helm for those of you who want more information on Dwarven culture. Also, while I have not yet read Sky King's Tomb, it seems like it would do an excellent job of exploring Dwarven history. Next time, I'll be focusing on another curmudgeonly god of community, Erastil, the god of farming, hunting, and family. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out my rules supplement Expanded Ancestries on Pathfinder Infinite. It adds over 200 new ancestry feats to the game, spread among each of the ancestries not covered by the Pathfinder 2e remaster. And be sure to like and subscribe to see more videos like this.